Jack must have been thinking something strange when he put a light bulb in his mouth and couldn't get it out. Emily had no choice but to call 911, explaining that her brother had been trying to decorate the room with his hands free. So he put the bulb in his mouth only for it to slip down and get stuck. The paramedics rushed in to find Jack desperately trying to pull the bulb out. Sivy quickly stopped him, knowing that breaking it inside his mouth was out of the question. Jack was on the verge of tears. He couldn't understand why something that went in so easily was so hard to get out. Worried Jack might panic and bite the bulb, Sarah instructed him to breathe through his nose to calm down. She then had a teammate fetch pliers to try extracting the bulb, but Sivy thought this was impossible. She could only switch to a suction cup, hoping it might trigger a gag reflex to dislodge the bulb. But Jack's mouth was completely stuffed, there was no room. Plus, Jack was shaking his head violently, refusing to cooperate. The paramedics were helpless. Seeing no time to waste, Sivy decided to take a chance and performed the Heimlich maneuver. She wrapped her arms around Jack from behind and began applying force. That damn light bulb finally came out. Never had she witnessed such a terrifying situation. The doctor extracted a rocket-propelled grenade from the patient's body. Just moments ago, an ambulance had delivered an injured patient. But as the doctor opened the door, he saw only Lisa, covered in blood, screaming in terror. It turned out the paramedic had shoved his entire arm into the patient's chest to stop the bleeding. Lisa, unaccustomed to such scenes, was utterly terrified. 30 minutes of screaming proved unbearable for intern Owen, so he resorted to a desperate tactic. Lisa was utterly bewildered, but the tactic worked. Covered in blood, she was actually unharmed. Once calm, Lisa explained her husband's injury. It turned out her husband was a military enthusiast. That day, he and a friend were experimenting with a rocket launcher at home. Unexpectedly, the rocket propelled into his chest. Fortunately, it was a dud and didn't explode otherwise. Her husband would have been gone. While Lisa was relieved she wouldn't be widowed, she didn't notice Owen breaking out in a cold sweat. Owen sprinted toward the operating room at top speed. Inside, the surgeon had already picked up the scalpel. Fortunately, he arrived just in time. The operation hadn't begun yet. Upon realizing she was holding a live rocket that could detonate at any moment, the paramedic nearly wet herself. The lead surgeon quickly evacuated the medical staff and followed the bomb disposal expert to discuss the deactivation procedure. Left alone in the operating room were the intern clutching the rocket and the anesthesiologist manually maintaining the patient's breathing. The intern was terrified, fearing the slightest mistake would turn her into mincemeat. Thankfully, an older physician stayed by her side, calming her frantic heart slightly, but she never expected the seemingly steady anesthesiologist to desert her at the critical moment. 1 second he was gently reassuring her. Suddenly he said his mother was in labor. Watching the anesthesiologists retreating back, the intern felt utter despair. She was only 22. Was today her last day? By the time other doctors realized something was wrong and tried to urge her to hold on, the girl had already broken down. Shaking uncontrollably and tears streaming down her face, she bolted from the scene. To everyone's surprise, the rocket-propelled grenade didn't detonate. When they got up to investigate, they discovered that Gray had grabbed it the moment the intern pulled her hand away. Gray herself was bewildered. She didn't know why she'd taken this job. The bomb disposal expert then fitted her with a blast vest and instructed her to stay calm. But just then, the director summoned the bomb disposal expert. Pointing to the hospital blueprint, he explained that oxygen pipes crisscrossed beneath the operating room. If it detonated, the entire hospital would be leveled. To minimize damage, they had no choice but to evacuate Gray and the rocket launcher together to a secure room. Everyone was on edge, but thankfully the transfer went smoothly. They reached the designated location without incident. The next steps were retrieving the rocket launcher and rescuing the hostages. The bomb disposal expert repeatedly cautioned GRE to keep the launcher perfectly leveled during retrieval. Even the slightest tilt could trigger detonation. Though GRE was overcome with panic, she successfully completed the extraction and handed it to the bomb disposal expert. But just as he stepped outside, disaster struck. The expert was blown to pieces. By some miracle, Greer had positioned herself just beyond the critical safety threshold, sustaining only minor injuries. Ironically, the reckless individual who had mishandled the rocket launcher survived. That day, a traffic accident occurred. A sedan was hanging precariously from the 6th floor. It turned out the car had been traveling too fast, collided with another vehicle, crushed its roof, and then took off from the spot. Fortunately, the driver, Mike, was still alive. Trapped in the mangled cockpit, He frantically called for help. Ryder instructed his team to bring ropes and wooden planks to stabilize the vehicle using the doorframe. Firefighter Della prepared to rescue him from outside, but as she approached, Mike's frantic movements caused the car to sway. Fortunately, the team had reinforced it in advance. Terrified, Mike stopped moving and cooperated with the rescue. With his feet trapped by the brake pedal, Della had to crawl inside to free him, but the moment she entered, the vehicle lost balance. Seeing the truck tilt backward and teeter on the edge of a drop, Ryder rushed forward and braced his body against the front end, temporarily stabilizing it. The other teammates immediately grabbed ropes, looping them around the frame and using their collective weight to hold the heavy vehicle. Della seized the moment, skillfully rotating the driver's trapped right foot. Just as Mike successfully escaped and climbed out of the cabin, the vehicle lost balance again and began to fall. All teammates strained every muscle to hold the car, buying Della precious time to escape. Thankfully, just before the crash, Delia leapt out. Baby Amy's leg twitched incessantly, yet doctors insisted removing half her brain was essential to save her life. To verify their diagnosis, they administered a sedative. Sure enough, Amy's left leg stopped twitching, but her parents' hearts sank. This confirmed the dreaded prophecy. The subsequent MRI results struck them like lightning. Amy's brain displayed an eerie black and white pattern. Doctors diagnosed Rasmussen's encephalitis. Amy's brain showed an eerie black and white pattern. Doctors diagnosed Rasmussen's encephalitis. The black areas were already necrotic tissue that must be removed immediately, or infection would threaten her life. Her parents couldn't imagine how their daughter could survive with half her brain gone, but the doctor offered hope, explaining that young children's brains possess remarkable plasticity. Nerve cells would regenerate. He assured them Amy could return to normal life within a month post-surgery. Yet her parents felt powerless, placing all their hope in the surgical team. However, just before the operation, chaos erupted with anesthesiologist Taylor. He entered the operating room reeking of alcohol. The intern was stunned and alerted the lead surgeon about Taylor's odor, but the surgeon chose to side with Taylor. The entire hospital knew Taylor was a chronic alcoholic, yet no one dared challenge this veteran.
I'm sorry, Dr. Taylor, but did you just... Have you been drinking? I beg your pardon?
Taylor then retaliated against the intern.
You're out, George.
The lead surgeon warned Taylor not to botch the procedure, but the drunkard brazenly claimed he was sharper the drunker he got. Midway through the surgery, Amy showed signs of waking up. The lead surgeon urgently called for Taylor.
He's asleep.
Taylor! Dr. Taylor!
Oh, God. Sorry. I'm on it.
Taylor claimed he'd nearly dozed off and hastily administered additional anesthesia. Finally losing his temper, the lead surgeon kicked the drunkard out of the operating room. Fortunately, the surgery succeeded. The diseased tissue was completely removed. Post-op, the surgeon explained the unspoken rule in medicine: never question a colleague. He sincerely apologized and promised to prevent such incidents. Little Amy finally got a new lease on life, but the hospital's culture of silence remained deeply troubling. Charlie was merely knocked down during basketball, yet he collapsed with no pulse. The paramedics who rushed over were stunned. James was on the verge of breaking down with guilt. How could a normal collision lead to this? Just as the paramedics prepared to administer a defibrillation shock, the defibrillator mysteriously malfunctioned. The device showed sufficient power but failed to deliver the current. Repeated attempts still ended in failure. Fortunately, the PE teacher brought a backup defibrillator. This time, the device functioned normally, and Charlie's heartbeat finally returned. However, the paramedics were deeply troubled, as the 5-minute delay might have caused permanent neurological damage. Back at the fire station, they tested the equipment but couldn't find any fault. After a technical expert disassembled and inspected it, they concluded the instrument was in perfect working order. This meant that if blame were assigned, it would be due to their operational error. During the investigation, both were suspended. While packing their belongings, they reviewed the entire incident and uncovered a crucial clue. It turned out the mint-scented ointment used by firefighters commonly applied for muscle soreness had interfered with the defibrillator's conductivity. The paramedics discovered all gel pads in the station had dried out. Subsequent experiments confirmed their hypothesis: dry gel could not conduct electricity at all. They immediately reported this to their superiors. Once the truth was revealed, authorities promptly inspected all stations. The issue of gel evaporation due to high-temperature storage was completely resolved. Ultimately, Charlie recovered well with no lasting complications. The two paramedics were exonerated and kept their jobs. This harrowing rescue mission finally reached a happy ending. Henry arrived at the clinic for treatment. The doctor placed a jet black leech on his nose. Henry not only showed no aversion but actually wore an expression of enjoyment. The doctor then placed leeches on his fingers and ears, leaving them until they were full and fell off. It turned out Henry had malignant melanoma. Post-surgery, he developed multiple bruises. If left untreated, the affected tissue would necrotize. This unique leech therapy, however, was ideal for his condition. The leeches sucked out the blood clots and secreted natural anticoagulants. The doctor had expected Henry to be afraid of these blood-sucking soft-bodied creatures. But for Henry, who loved wilderness adventures, these little critters were hardly worth mentioning. On the contrary, he highly approved of this pure, natural biological therapy. However, the nurse assigned to treat him was so terrified her scalp tingled, making it impossible for her to get the leeches to attach to Henry. The doctor beside her explained that leeches feared bright light. Simply turning off the lights would do the trick. Sure enough, the leeches immediately latched onto Henry's nose, hands, and even ears, feasting heartily. When the doctor attempted to dispose of them, Henry vehemently protested, declaring these lifesavers his new pets to take home. Though stunned, the doctor granted Henry's unusual request. These blood-sucking creatures not only cured his ailment but also earned names.
This one here on my finger, that's Darcy. And that little guy on my nose, named O'Malley.
Jacob's hand got stuck in the Snowblower, and he screamed for help. When the firefighters arrived, they found one of his fingers had fallen to the ground. The rescue team immediately shut down the Snowblower. Della quickly devised a precise rescue plan, but just as the paramedic picked up the severed finger, Jacob realized his finger was missing. He was terrified and panicked. The paramedic quickly reassured him that the clean cut meant the finger could be reattached. Jacob then confessed he'd been trying to earn pocket money by shoveling neighbors' snow to buy a video game console. To speed up his earnings, he'd modified the machine himself, leading to the accident. However, halfway through the amputation, they encountered a problem. The cutting blade was too close to Jacob's remaining hand. The slightest misstep could cause secondary injury. The firefighter's silence made Jacob even more anxious. Team medic Delia quickly reassured him.
I've seen you make cuts down to a millimeter. You've got this.
Amid flying sparks, the firefighter finally completed the amputation flawlessly.
I know that looks scary. Really clean cut. It's a good chance the doctors will be able to put that right back on, right back to Call of Duty.